So check this out. Google just finished its annual survey looking at how much more the evil men are making at their company relative to the women. And guess what? Women actually got paid more. So how does that fit into the leftist narrative of gender inequality and wage disparity? We'll take a look. Plus, the House of Representatives is scheduled to vote on a resolution aimed squarely at Representative Ilhan Omar for her anti-Semitic comments over and over again. But there's pushback, namely from people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We'll look at some of the comments, plus a whole lot more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
And God bless the United States of America.
All right, first of all, folks, I want to just thank you for all your support for the show. You know, it's relatively new, and after Monday's show, we just hit 1,000 subscribers, which was a big milestone for me. We're going to keep growing, keep doing it, and so I really appreciate all the comments you've been leaving. In fact, on Friday's show, we're going to dive into some of the comments, some feedback, some questions people have asked me, and I'm going to give some responses and just get a little interaction going. So please leave comments. They may make it on Friday's show. And thanks for joining me and supporting the show. Please tell your friends and subscribe. Hit the bell so you get notified. And let's dive into the show. So first of all, we're going to talk about Google because it's just so funny. They did this annual survey. You know, they're one of these social justice warrior companies along with, you know, almost all the big tech companies now. And so they want to address gender inequality. So they've got to find out just how much more the men are making. So because of course they're making more, and then adjust it, you know, correct this grave injustice. So when they got the data back, they found something that's just remarkable. And that is that the women actually made more. So their whole narrative is that they don't know what to do about it because the men were getting paid less. Now they've got to make these wage adjustments and actually compensate the men for the disparity. And it just goes into this narrative, this myth of this wage gap that men, you know, systemically in society make more than women. And we're going to get into some interesting stats, some myth busting we'll do in a little bit, but I wanted to go over this New York Times story on Google because it just really brings to light how misguided these companies are where they try to right wrongs that don't exist, but they fit a leftist narrative that just makes them feel good. So here's what the New York Times had to say about Google's recent survey. Take a look. When Google conducted a survey recently to determine whether the company was underpaying women and members of minority groups, it found, to the surprise of just about everyone, that men were paid less money than women for doing similar work. It goes on. The story, which just proportionally led to pay raises for thousands of men, is done every year, but the latest findings arrived as Google and other companies in Silicon Valley face increasing pressure to deal with gender issues in the workplace, from sexual harassment to wage discrimination. So it's funny that, you know, they did this to adjust for the women disparity, and they find out that it's the men that were actually behind the eight ball as far as wages goes. And that's because there are a lot of factors involved. It's not companies, you know, singling out women or discriminating against women. In fact, as we've talked about in other shows, if you're a woman or a minority, as far as, you know, jobs, as far as college entrances, things like that, you have a leg up. You have a greater chance of getting that particular job. You have a better chance of getting into that particular college because of the government programs and these incentives for minorities and women. That's just the way it is in today's society. So to go the opposite route, to claim that, you know, women are being discriminated against as far as wages, their own survey found that it wasn't true. But let's dig in. The New York Times goes on. Here's more. Google seems to be advancing a flawed and incomplete sense of equity by making sure men and women receive similar salaries for similar work, said Joel Emerson, chief executive of Paradigm, a consulting company that advises companies on strategies for increasing diversity. That is not the same as addressing equity, she said, which would involve examining the structural hurdles that women face as engineers. All right, so I brought that one up because, you know, anytime you have a company that's, you know, sole purpose is to increase diversity, that should be a red flag right there. And it's just funny what they say in that they want women and men to be paid equally. But the fact that Google is addressing that and striving to pay men and women equally, that doesn't solve the problem. You know, that's not really what we're looking for, because they're always looking for a problem, because if there's a problem, there's a victim. And if there's a victim, you can point to a bad guy, which is someone on the right. And so it's just funny that this person from Paradigm, this, you know, diversity company, says that paying them equally isn't addressing the real problem, because they'll always find something else. They'll always find someone who's, you know, being left behind, as they say. And you just have to really watch out for that, because as these companies, you know, strive to pay equally, there'll always be something that someone else is saying, hey, this isn't fair, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. They have a disadvantage. This white man has some advantage, you know, just from, you know, being white and being a man, which is actually advantageous these days. So, but it addresses, the report also talked about some of these myths. And as you recall, there was a memo that got leaked and circulated because someone at Google was brave enough to point out the craziness of some of these policies. And the New York Times actually brought that up. Here's one more clip from the New York Times. It says, Google's workforce, especially in leadership and high-paying technical roles, is overwhelmingly male and mostly white and Asian. Its efforts to increase diversity have touched off an internal culture war. In 2017, James Damore, a software engineer, wrote a widely circulated memo criticizing the company's diversity programs. He argued that biological differences and not lack of opportunity explain the shortage of women in upper-tier positions. And so he's absolutely right. And that's why I want to address some of these facts, some of these myths, because they talk about this wage gap. You know, if you look at any tweets from, you know, Alyssa Milano or celebrities or anyone that just gives a quick leftist soundbite, they'll talk about this, you know, for every dollar a man makes, a woman makes 77 cents. And they use that as just a, you know, a be-all, end-all term or phrase that shows, you know, that there's some injustice there. But they don't look at the facts. They don't look at the jobs that men tend to go to versus what women go to. They don't look at the number one reason for a disparity in wages comes down to two words, and that's personal choices. Women tend to choose different careers than men. There's differences in how men think and women think, and how men act and women act, and just interests and likes and things like that, passions. And so PragerU, I'll put a link to their video in my description, but I wanted to just point out some of these things that leads to this difference in wages, because when you see it, it just points out the obvious. Now, so they cited in their video a study by Georgetown University, which listed the top 5 best paying college majors and the worst 5 paying college majors. And I wanted to look at this list and the percentage breakdown between men and women. Let's take a look. Okay, so this is the top 5 best paying college majors. Number 1, petroleum engineering, 87% male. Pharmaceutical sciences, 48% male. Mathematics and computer science, 67% male. Aerospace engineering, 88% male. And I can attest to that. There was just a whole lot of dudes. Chemical engineering, 72% male. Okay, so of those top 5, only one of them was majority female, and that was pharmaceutical sciences. So let's look at the worst paying ones. You have counseling and psychology, 74% female. Early childhood education, 97% female. Theology and religious vocations, 34% female. Human services and community organization, 81% female. And social work, 88% female. So there, it's completely flipped. Only one of those 5 was majority male. So if you look at that, men are overrepresented in the fields that pay more, and women are overrepresented in the fields that pay less. They choose to go into these fields. So that's going to lead, obviously, to differences in wages and benefits and things like that. It's not some kind of grand evil plan. It's just the differences between men and women in the careers they tend to like more than others. So take a look at that. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the description. And now I want to go on to what's going on in the House of Representatives. Representative Ilhan Omar over and over again has spouted off anti-Semitic comments, and finally the House is taking action. And it was supposed to be today. It looks like it may be delayed, a vote on a resolution basically condemning that type of speech. They're not going to name her specifically, even though they should. But now there's getting pushback from progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others to water down the language or bring in other forms of bigotry and homophobia and things like that. And, you know, just on, rather than just focusing on the meat right there. And here's a tweet from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She says, "Calling out is one of the measures of last resort, not first or second resort. We do it when repeated attempts to call in are disrespected or ignored. And I believe that Ilhan, in her statement a few weeks ago, has demonstrated a willingness to listen, work with impacted communities." Okay, so how long do you go before you call someone out, according to her? Because this is a pattern of years. You know, she's only been in the House a few months, and even now she's drawn attention in just those few months for recent comments. But her history of anti-Semitism is years old, and you can just search on Twitter and find out that this is a pattern that she has continued in the House of Representatives. She didn't just show up and decide to make a few, you know, off-the-cuff comments that, you know, she was inexperienced and didn't know. This is a pattern for her. So Cortez's, you know, comments just show an idiocy and a lack of reason. But I want to jump into something else that she said that was just amazing. I think these last 2 days she's really gone on a Twitter rant, and she's gone from, you know, Omar's comments to diving into foreign policy in general. And this is where I've got to wonder what she's talking about, because she decided to go into the Afghan war following 9/11, our response to 9/11. And here's what she said. "I remember a time when it was unacceptable to question the Iraq war. All of Congress was wrong, including both GOP and Dem Party, and led my generation into a disastrous, wrong war that virtually all would come to regret, except for the one member who stood up, Barbara Lee." So she then goes on and corrects it. She said, "Afghan war, I'm sorry, my apologies. But honestly, we shouldn't have been in either, and we should end the AUMF, which is the authorization to use military force, which came after 9/11, now while we're at it." So basically what she said is that the war in Afghanistan, our response to 9/11 was wrong, and we shouldn't have done anything basically to fight al-Qaeda, which the Taliban in Afghanistan was not only shielding Osama bin Laden, protecting him, but sponsoring their terrorist acts. And so Jake Tapper over at CNN asked, what should we do? And here was her response. She said, "I think our decision to enter unlimited engagement in Afghanistan, particularly through the AUMF, plus Congress's abdication of power and decision-making with passage of the AUMF, was a mistake. Other options: targeting the network itself, limited engagement, non-intervention." So a organization sponsored by the Taliban, housed in Afghanistan, comes and kills thousands of Americans, and our response should be non-intervention, limited engagement, and targeting the network. Well, guess what? We targeted the network. We went after them and blew them out of the skies and eventually got bin Laden. That was our response. And her comments, just for someone who was there and saw the plane hit the Pentagon, I just find it absolutely outrageous, absolutely out of touch, and shows that she just does not have a grasp of our American system of government and what we stand for. So that one I just had to pass that along because it really fired me up. And I'll post some more information, some other links to some of her tweets in the description. But we're out of time for today. I wanted to take that little extra time to thank you guys again for supporting the channel. Thanks a lot. Please subscribe. Please check out if your comments make it into Friday's show. Tell your friends about it. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.